What I know about withdrawal, it is extremely uncomfortable. Babies cry a lot. They cry nonstop. They're difficult to console. They're frantic.
They are the most innocent of victims, infants who begin life as heroin addicts because their mothers were addicted.
Dependence, so to speak, starts in the womb. They look hungry, but they are not able to eat.
By law, Metro Health can't tell us for certain which babies in intensive care were born addicted, but more and more of them are here all the time.
We've really seen an explosion of moms who are opiate dependent here at Metro Health.
Metro Health says in 2001 it saw less than 10 moms addicted to heroin or opiates, the prescription pills that are heroin's legal cousins with names such as oxycodone or Oxycontin. By 2008, that number more than doubled to 22. By 2011, it tripled again to 66, and last year Metro saw 98 pregnant moms with heroin or opiate addictions.
We see a continuum from moms who have been on pills and maybe that's gotten away from them to moms who've sort of graduated from pills and are on heroin IV use.
I relapsed while I was pregnant with her, and I used until 3 weeks ago.
Randy Carr was one of the pregnant moms we met 2 years ago in southeastern Ohio.
You want my kisses?
The place where the opiate pill explosion began in our state.
This is affecting my kids. It's not just about me anymore. It's time to quit being selfish.
Sometimes when they find out they're pregnant, women who are addicted or dependent really have sort of a wake-up moment of this is not who I want to be, this is not the mother I want to be. And so we really stress for them that we can't fix what's happened in the past, but we're going to help you have a bright future.
That's not only true for some moms, but also for some dads. The birth of his first daughter motivated Jeremy Tonger to get off the pills and the heroin and start a support group called CARE in Portage County.
Finally, something inside me just clicked. I knew that I was a drug addict and alcoholic. There was no denial, and I knew I couldn't do any of it.
But Jeremy says it took a sobering experience to help him shake heroin's grip.
Having to see my little daughter shake uncontrollably in the hospital, it was hard, but it was also eye-opening.
Doctors here at Metro can't take babies off of opiates cold turkey. That would be too dangerous and too painful. Instead, they give them opiates, often usually morphine, and then gradually wean them from their addiction. But make no mistake, many of the babies here are very sick.
Every day is different. We win some and we lose some.
Dr. Kumar says they win more than they lose, but they are seeing more and more addicted babies, in large part because more moms who started out on a prescription for something as mild as a backache are becoming addicts.
Clearly, we have a problem with prescription medication. So it's a question of educating the medical community a lot more.
The problem is not so much that doctors are creating addiction, is that doctors are feeding addiction.
Dr. Ed Covington is the director of the Cleveland Clinic's Neurological Center for Pain. He says about 25 years ago, some research suggested that patients who were on opiate pills to combat pain were far less likely to get addicted than people using heroin for fun. That turned out to be dead wrong.
At national medical meetings, we were being told that if our patients were still in pain, it was because of our own cowardice. We were simply too timid to use the doses of opioids that were required to make people comfortable.
Dr. Cummington says no long-term research existed to support that idea, but doctors bought into it.
I really believe that American physicians have been not uneducated, but maleducated. We have been fed a pack of lies.
It's not just research that's been called into question, so has the marketing of painkillers to doctors. In one case, in 2007, the makers of Oxycontin, Purdue Pharma, paid $600 million in fines and other payments to resolve criminal charges that it misbranded the drug. The company had said the drug was less likely to be abused and positioned it that way to doctors. In a statement, the company accepted responsibility for past misstatements and expressed regret that they were made. Dr. Covington says the effects of physicians routinely prescribing large numbers of different opiates for chronic pain has been devastating.
There's pretty good evidence that of all people who are taking chronic long-term opioids therapeutically, a third of them have an addiction. And that is huge.
And heroin addictions are among the hardest to beat, no matter what age you are.
It is very difficult to get clean, but moms will do things for their babies they haven't been able to do in any other time in their life.
And for more and more babies, life itself is beginning with a painful addiction to heroin, a sure sign that this epidemic remains today out of control.
We were close. We were very close. And you tell them you can come to us with anything.
Robert and Carla Brandt's oldest son, Robbie, had graduated from Olmsted Falls High School and was set to deploy to Afghanistan in 2011 when he was found by East Cleveland police not far from here, dead of a heroin overdose. Robbie was just 20 years old. On the day he died, his father says Robbie had been heroin-free for 110 days and had reached out to 3 friends, but got each of their voicemails.
And the 4th phone call he made that morning was to a dealer.
Is it surprising that he didn't call you or your wife?
He just didn't want us to know that he was struggling. He just didn't want us to be disappointed.
You were on his side,
Yes.
but he was basically afraid to call you.
Yeah.
Had he called you, might have been a different outcome.
There's not a day that goes by that we, Carla and I, don't look back at every day and go, if we did this, if we did that, if we changed this, if we would have done this, would the outcome have been different? You know, I don't know.
Even if you know you have no reason to beat yourself up, it's probably hard not to, am I right?
You just know you didn't save your kid. Doesn't matter, logic doesn't matter. We were his parents.
Robbie's parents had jumped in head first to try and save their son, identifying his problem, getting him to rehab, gently confronting him when he relapsed, and getting him back into rehab. Like many addicts, Robbie died out here on the streets. But also, like many addicts, Robbie's addiction began with a completely legal prescription.
And we didn't know that his brain could latch on to that feeling or that drug that quickly, but you know, that medication lit up his brain and he liked it.
The medication was opiate pills, heroin's legal cousin, with names such as oxycodone and oxycontin. It was prescribed for pain after Robbie had his wisdom teeth removed when he was 16. His parents had him off those pills in just 2 days.
Where other people may feel sick, people that are prone to addiction or other people, they get this euphoria and it's, you know, the brain remembers it and it wants more.
Robbie followed an all-too-familiar path towards death, first getting opiate pills from other teens, and then searching out on the streets for heroin that he could inject, bringing an even more intense high.
He knew it was wrong and he knew it was dangerous, but that pull was so strong.
What is that power that grabs somebody like that?
The power of opiates, the power of heroin is so strong. It's always there. It will chase you the rest of your life. One of the most profound statements that a number of these kids say is, we crossed this line and we didn't even know it. We have to get by the stigma.
The stigma is you're the parent of a heroin addict.
It's about the family. It's the family name. It's about who you are as a parent. Oh, golly, how did you let your kid become, you know, a drug addict? It doesn't make you any worse of a parent than if your kid went to a party and you didn't know and they had a beer. It's that prevalent.
You call heroin the devil.
Yes.
Why, in your mind, is it the worst?
It is so powerful. And it will kill you so quickly.
When you look back now, what could you have done differently?
I wish we would have been more educated as to what are the signs. I spent 40 years of my life saying, why don't they just quit? Just stop, just don't do it. And it's not the way it works. And I had to live through it to learn that it's not the way it works.
It sounds like you did everything you could to get between your son and heroin, and you still lost your son.
There's no sequence of buttons and levers to push that'll make everything out. In a large view, it's to some degree a roll of the dice.
There are parents watching us now who aren't sure. Some of their kids probably don't have problems. Some of them probably do. What would you say to them?
Are you willing to be open and understand the fact that this can happen in your world. What are you willing to do to protect your child's life?
You prayed every day.
Every day. Take this away from him. Give it to me. Carla, take it away from him. Give it to me. I still pray every day.
What do you pray now?
You know, I just pray that he's free. You know, I know he's free. And I give thanks. I give thanks for 20 years.
And life becomes marked by these traumatic events and medical stuff. You completely lose your sense of norm.
People here are fighting to get their lives back. They are participants in a multidiscipline intensive outpatient program at the Cleveland Clinic. Participants here battle chronic pain, and the clinic says about half the people it treats face an addiction to heroin or much more often to opiate pills, the prescription painkillers that are heroin's legal cousins.
Opioids are known for that, causing rebound pain.
The program teaches participants to change how they look at pain, to take control of it, even when talking to their doctors.
And you're still at a pain level of whatever, and somebody's got a prescription pad saying, are you sure you don't want something for the... You're going to need to remember, you know, oh yeah, there's that rebound thing.
This program is having remarkable success in an area where success is very rare.
30% of people who have been addicted to nicotine will eventually get free of it and stay free of it.
And 4% with heroin.
And about 4% with heroin.
Dr. Ed Cummington is one of the nation's leading experts on pain. He runs the Cleveland Clinic's Neurological Center for Pain, and the patients who report back from the clinic's program claim a 75% success rate in staying off heroin or opiates.
The question is it because there's something special about me, or is it because there's something special about them?
Dr. Cummington says in the clinic's program, family participation is key. Spouses, for example, often join in the sessions. The 3 women participants each had their husbands with them in the session we attended. It is far more complicated than this, but basically, the program teaches people how to manage pain, including ways to reduce stress, exercise more, and take over-the-counter pain pills, rather than having doctors try to eliminate pain through prescribing opiates.
A pain level of 0 in a chronic pain patient is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You're never going to find it. And if you chase a 0 pain level, you're likely to kill your patient. And we see that the higher dose of narcotics patients are prescribed, the more likely they are to turn up in the coroner's office.
Dr. Cummington adds that doctors need to understand that no good data exists for the effects of having people on opiates for years on end.
In effect, we're doing a national experiment, and the question we're asking is what happens if the United States decides to use 85% of the world's narcotic supply? Does that help our country, or does it hurt our country?
The clinic's program has impressive results, although almost everybody who attends has insurance, as the cost can run to $20,000 or higher. For people who can't afford that or don't have insurance, there are normally programs out here to help, usually through counties, but sometimes people have to resort to desperate measures just to get any help.
I went to Cuyahoga County and stayed in a homeless shelter to become a resident of that county so I could qualify for residential treatment. Because I was homeless, I qualified.
Jeremy Togner is from Ravenna in Portage County, a county which had no residential treatment program for men in place for those who just wanted help. Jeremy had committed a drug-related misdemeanor here, but he was told the only way he could get help was to, believe it or not, go out and commit a more serious crime.
And I asked the judge for help. He told me I didn't commit a felony, so there really was no help that he could give me.
And Jeremy wasn't the only one who needed the help.
My son Damien had struggled like Jeremy from the time he was 14, 15.
Valerie Root lost her son in 2010. Damien was 29 when he overdosed.
To lose a child in any circumstance, there's nothing you can't tell anybody. Part of you dies right along with them.
Valerie took her grief and Jeremy took his experience, and together they formed CARE, an organization that now offers men in Portage County who battle addiction a place to go for help.
When guys want help, they have nowhere to go. I mean, they feel lost. I felt lost.
Valerie and Jeremy found an ally in Joel Mowry, who runs the county's mental health board, and found them the money for the Men's Drug Treatment Center.
If these problems can be treated in the communities, the crime rate would go down.
That's because addicts often steal to pay for their addictions. But treatment, especially privately run programs like the one at the Cleveland Clinic, are an endangered species.
The rehabilitation programs that have been repeatedly demonstrated to help these people, over 90% of them have gone out of business because they lose money. So much of our health care is driven by incomes rather than by outcomes. We're doing what's reimbursed and not what's therapeutic.
But clearly more, not fewer, programs are needed, like the one Valerie helped start in memory of her son.
I talk to him all the time, and I hope he's proud. And I know my son's not suffering anymore. He's got no more demons.
All rise, please.
Perhaps no one in Cleveland has seen up close more people's lives devastated or destroyed
She's going to be dead.
by heroin than drug court judge David Mattia.
Did you see it getting as bad as it has gotten?
Yes. We had people die in drug court in our first year.
In drug court, Mattia can be tough.
You didn't like jail so much.
When it's called for, and encouraging when it's deserved.
Well, we're glad you're standing here in the honor box.
Yeah.
How you feel?
I'm glad to have this chance.
The deal in drug court is pretty simple. Show up for your court appearances, get help, stay clean for a year, and you can avoid jail and a felony on your record. And don't push your luck.
Because there comes a point where we want it more than you want it, and we figure that out, we're done with you.
And that normally means you are going to jail. But until that moment, what makes drug court different is that everyone, including the prosecutor and the defense attorney, are on the same side, the defendant's side, trying to help people get clean. The team puts in a lot of work behind the scenes fighting a horrible trend. In 1999, 327 people died of unintentional overdoses in Ohio. By 2011, that number was 1,765, an alarming 440% increase. Drug overdoses have passed car wrecks as the state's #1 accidental killer.
It continues to ravage our communities, all of our communities.
We were in Mattia's drug court 3 years ago when he asked this.
Raise your hand if you're primarily opiate dependent, opiate or heroin. Raise your hand.
19 of 38 defendants raised their hands that day, and when we went back last week, 27 of 32 defendants raised their hands as dependent on heroin or opiates, heroin's legal cousins with names such as oxycodone and oxycontin. Judge Mattia has been sounding alarm bells for years about the relationship between the explosion in heroin deaths and the number of people being prescribed opiate-based painkillers.
Our friends in the medical community really need to step up and take a look at their prescribing practices. Last year in the state, there were over 800 million opiate-based medication pills prescribed to Ohioans.
That number, combined with the alarming number of deaths, has helped move the heroin debate front and center.
Judge, I'm looking at you because you've been a passionate advocate of this.
Judge Mattia is one of many local leaders, including doctors, law enforcement officers, treatment experts, and the Ohio Attorney General's office, who are all now part of a high-level working group organized by U.S. Attorney Steve Dettelbach.
The reality is that it's going to take an all-of-the-above approach. Heroin devastation is among the top, if not the top, law enforcement threat to our community.
But Dettelbach will be the first to say that the region can't just police its way out of this epidemic. At this meeting, one participant estimated, it is not a hard number, that between 40 and 70,000 people in our area may have a heroin or opiate addiction problem. A first step forward may be to stem the tide, to prevent more people from becoming pill addicts, starting perhaps with changing how and how often doctors prescribe opiates for pain control.
I really think that physicians need to have conversations with patients. What's realistic?
University Hospitals was at the forefront 3 years ago when it adopted opiate guidelines for its doctors to follow. The guidelines look first for alternatives to prescribing opiates, track the patients who receive opiates very closely for signs of addiction, and perhaps most importantly, have doctors talk to patients ahead of time about reducing their level of pain rather than trying to eliminate it.
There are some things in life that are going to be painful, and for us to get you to a 0 out of 10 may be dangerous. That's exactly the discussion that physicians have to have with their patients. What should you expect from this? What's realistic? And what's dangerous?
And it's not just hospitals and courts that are now paying more attention, so is the state legislature. 2 months ago, it began working on proposals that would pump $180 million, a huge sum, into opiate heroin treatment. They would also require that all opiates be filled only in small dose prescriptions, and they would make university hospitals' guidelines state law.
So I think our guidelines were innovative, we're sort of first out of the box, if you will.
And while appreciative of the state's response, Dr. Anderson says UH believes making the guidelines law would tie doctors' hands too much in treating their patients.
The last thing we want to have happen is another set of regulations come between that physician and that patient. We think guidelines are a much better way for physicians and patients to work together.
Working together, whether it's celebrating the number of months sober in drug court.
5 months, let's have a clap for 5.
Or leaders coming together to search for answers. The need is urgent. On average, 5 people now die in Ohio from drug overdoses every day. We have been tracking the explosion of heroin deaths and its relationship to prescription pills for 3 years now, starting in Portsmouth at the southern tip of Ohio, where the epidemic began in our state.
The number of deaths, it was proportionate to the number of pills being prescribed in this area.
The pills Jay referred to are opiates, painkillers that are heroin's legal cousins with names such as oxycodone and oxycontin. We learned that in 1997, doctors prescribed 7 opiate pills per capita in Ohio. That is enough to give each person in the state 7 pills. By 2010, that number was 67, almost a 10-fold increase. We've learned from recovering addicts like Terry Ballingy that an addiction to heroin or opiates can be overwhelming.
I didn't care. I was ready to die.
And we learned from experts that this epidemic did not really begin on the streets, but in many doctors' offices.
That's where this particular epidemic started. It started between pharmaceutical companies and primary care physicians.
We've learned that pain experts such as Dr. Ed Covington at the Cleveland Clinic have been warning for years that doctors simply didn't have the information they need to prescribe opiates properly.
Most of our studies showing the effectiveness of narcotics for chronic pain are 6-month studies. But based on that, we're recommending that people take narcotics for a condition that's going to last 40 years. We're all flying by the seat of our pants.
We've learned that doctors and hospitals are starting to make changes. University Hospitals has developed tight guidelines for its physician when it comes to prescribing opiates, including making them, in effect, a last resort treatment for most non-cancer pain.
I think we also have a public health duty, if you will. If we as organized medicine, we as individual physicians, see the fact that in our state more people are dying from opioid overdose than from car accidents, we've got to help step up to the plate.
We've learned that everyone has to step up to the plate and are starting to do so.
We didn't want that summit to be by any means the end of our efforts.
U.S. Attorney Steve Dettelbach is referring to a summit last November of 650 people hosted by the Cleveland Clinic on opiate abuse. Out of that summit came this high-level working group organized by Dettelbach that includes doctors, treatment specialists, social workers, and police officers.
Things are bad all over with respect to heroin. It's not just a Cleveland or a Northern Ohio problem, but things are really rough here right now.
Dettelbach says the region can't just police its way out of the epidemic, but he labels fighting heroin trafficking the top policing priority for the Justice Department in this region.
And what we see in the law enforcement community is many, many drug trafficking organizations who are spreading this poison all over our streets and killing our youth.
You are looking at about $9,000 worth of street heroin that was recently confiscated in Euclid. It would be mixed with other compounds and sold in small bags. Many addicts are starting on prescription pills, then transitioning to injecting cheaper street heroin that is more powerful. We learned that's what Rob Brand's son Robbie did. He overdosed and died at the age of 20.
Over the years, I would hear stories of somebody losing a child. What you think you would feel doesn't come close. It doesn't compare. You cannot describe what it's like to live every day. I think what you have to understand is not what would I miss, but what am I willing to do to protect my child.
Rob and his wife Carla did everything they could to protect their child, including getting him into rehab twice. They have formed a foundation, Robbie's Voice, to help other families battling addiction. That help begins with helping the addicts help themselves.
If we allow the stigma to exist, we allow this to live in silence, we lose. But if we break the silence, we can beat it.
It's very frightening, I'm sure, for parents watching us to hear you tell this story.
The hardest thing for us was when we came to the realization that we couldn't save his life, that he had to do it. There was nothing as a mom or a dad that we could do that was going to save his life.
The Ohio legislature is now drafting proposals that would spend $180 million on treatment, a large sum.
I hope everybody's meeting with their sponsor on a regular weekly basis in person.
And drug court judge David Matias says some of that money needs to go into drug-free halfway houses to help addicts that he sends to rehab stay off heroin after treatment.
You know, we have Habitat for Humanity. We need Habitat for Dependency.
Heroin is incredibly addictive, in part because addicts feel so bad, worse than the worst flu you've ever had, when they are withdrawing. They crave the pills or the injection that one day soon may kill them.
We have to care about the ones we're losing. We have to give them help to bring them back. They're not gone forever.
And all of us must remember that talk, like small bags of street heroin, is cheap. It's time to do more to try and save the thousands of people in Ohio who are still out there to save.